Okay, I would like to officially take this time, Dwayne, to thank you for taking the time to talk to me, to talk to all of our KISS listeners, because you are a legend, dude, when it comes to soccer, a Canadian breathing, living legend. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat today.
Thanks for having me.
Obviously, you had such a successful career in the world of soccer. So, everybody starts with a passion in life. So, can you tell us a little bit about how sports became your passion and why you decided that this was the right career path for you?
To be very honest, football or soccer chose me.
Mm-hmm.
I was very fortunate and blessed to grow up with um, parents, in particular a father that was very passionate about the game, loved the game. Um, Grew up playing it. My parents are Guyanese descent, so when they came to Toronto, they brought that same passion for soccer, for football here, and my older brothers played it. The kids in my community played it. I grew up in humble beginnings, metro housing communities, government housing, and a lot of the kids are that grew up in these areas, either immigrants or first generation Canadians like myself. And we play the game all the time. That was our. None of us had skates. None of us could afford skate time or ice time.
Mm-hmm.
So football, soccer was our number one go-to sport, and I was very fortunate to grow up in a community that embraced the game and in Scarborough, and I just grew my passion and my love for the game, competing against my older brothers, and of course being the younger brother, always trying to outdo the older brothers, compete against them, and I always had this hunger for winning. I was very competitive, and I think that helped me along my journey as a young aspiring athlete.
I like that you mentioned your parents, right? Like parents are Guyanese, they came here and they brought their love for soccer with them. So I know obviously they were an inspiration to you, but were there any specific Black athletes or figures that inspired your journey as a soccer player?
Oh yeah, 100%. Ben Johnson being most notable, seeing him win the 100 meters as a young kid was like, wow, he did it, so we can do it. Being a West Indian youth growing up in metro housing and knowing his journey, that really showed me that anything is possible. And there's so many influencers that I could look at outside of sports and in athletes in particular, from our community that we grew up. Ben Johnson obviously being the most notable one. To see a good friend of mine now, Mr. Lennox Lewis,
Mm-hmm.
a boxing champion. I mean, we had a we had, as we do even more so now, still have a lot of influential role models in our
Mm-hmm.
community that are doing amazing things, that are paving the way.
You mentioned something important as well before, like soccer is an affordable sport. A lot of the times kids don't have a chance to pursue hockey because that's more of an expensive sport and all those things. So did you feel that as a Black male, you were disadvantaged in the sporting world? Like, were you not given the same opportunities as others, or did you have to push harder to achieve what you have achieved today?
Well, that's a loaded question, because
Yeah.
yes, 100%, especially coming from Scarborough and having
Mhm.
that whole thing that comes with when people hear you're from Scarborough.
Yeah.
So overcoming that, overcoming playing in a real dominant Scottish English sport in Canada,
Mhm.
white sport, driven sport. But I have to also recognize people like Alex Bunbury, Lyndon Hooper, Randy Samuels, that also paved the way for guys like myself to say, wow, these guys could play in the Canadian national team. So so could we. And it was very challenging, because we had a very strong youth team, a very good youth team in Malvern,
Mhm.
which could easily had about 8 or 9 guys representing the national team. But I guess because of certain, they didn't want it to be a biased thing. They had to, spread the wealth throughout the whole of Canada, and select players from all over across the country. And that's a challenge too, even for a coach, to try to find that balance.
Mhm.
Right, so you don't show too much favoritism. And at that time, the Canadian Soccer Association was based out of Vancouver, right?
Mhm.
So they had a heavy, strong BC influence. But I was a hungry kid, that seeing a lot of friends fall off by the wayside, and for various reasons, we had to train all the way out in Hamilton Saturday and Sunday mornings. So it was a difficult journey, extremely difficult for an inner city kid, for a single parent growing up. but thankfully my father was dedicated towards me staying active, dedicated to continue driving my passion, and led me to fulfill my dream.
Hard work and dedication is always the key. And obviously, I feel like you're also a testament to when you have family support, how that can aid and help you and really help achieve your goals in life. So, um, like you mentioned, soccer is a very like British or Scottish dominant sport. So, as a Black athlete in that space, did you feel like an outsider in the world of soccer at all?
Yes, I did, but I also wanted to say, you know what, this is a perfect time for me, because soccer at that time in across Canada was very kick and runish,
Mhm.
right? Very direct football, right? So the defender will get the ball and just kick it, lump it up the field, or get it up to the forward as fast as they can. Where I grew up, my father was also my coach. I grew up in a more of a South American Brazilian style of football, where it's, play with flair, play with that joy, and
Mhm.
dance with the ball, and my dad would say dance with it, and um so I grew up in around that kind of football, West Indian
Mhm.
style, Brazilian style of football with flair. So taking that style of play into a very direct style of play was very challenging. Of course, when you bring in the culture in there, and then you bring in the where I'm coming from, Scarborough, it was even more of challenges. But one thing that I have to say, that the biggest thing I take from my family was self-belief.
Mhm.
Believing in yourself, um, always creating room to listen and observe and learn, but still have a firm belief in your ability and in yourself.
I want to hop off that idea of self belief because that's so important. So, in your career, were there any moments where you had like some real self doubt and you were guessing, like second guessing yourself, like, like, is this the right career path for me? Is this the right choice for my life? Because I 100%, and everybody knows this, racism exists in sports. A hundred
Yeah,
thousand million percent it does. So were there any times where you doubted yourself as a Black athlete because you had to deal with so many naysayers during your career?
many times, especially in Ontario, with the provincial program. They would make us go to training and they would run us into the ground.
Mhm.
And we wanted to play football. And I understand as I got older in terms of the fitness perspective of it, but sometimes it was just outside in the snow, and running in the cold. And we didn't, it was more to break us, but instead of breaking us, it actually made us stronger. And,
Mhm.
and I was able to use a lot of that, what people say with negative, and turn it around and make it positives for myself. So anytime I felt, um, a system or someone fighting against me, I use that to strengthen me, and I use that to prove them wrong. And I've always had that kind of desire to and I think it stems from a humble beginning. Hey,
Mhm.
you're a metro housing kid, you're not supposed to make it out the hood, you're not supposed to make it out the government housing. You're wet Guyanese, they don't know how, they don't know nothing about soccer, you only play cricket. Oh,
Mhm.
you're this color, or you can't make it. So I'm always battling these challenges, and along my journey, it's always been a test, and turn a mental test more than anything else, to overcome those negativities and say, you know what, okay, I'm going to show everybody, what we're worth. And I've always took the forefront of not only representing myself and my community, but also representing all the kids that go through that same struggle. And yeah, and I do it proudly.
I think it's self-talk, self-care, and self-encouragement is very, very hard to do. Like I think a lot of people think that it's a cliche thing to say, "Oh, I never doubted myself," but like you genuinely have to believe in yourself for that self-talk to work and for it to go somewhere. So I think in a sport where you're so open to the public eye, it takes a lot of that self-confidence to keep going after your dreams and
Yeah,
persevering. And there's one story in particular that I read about that like struck me, and I was like, I cannot believe this actually happened. So if you're comfortable talking about it, I wanted you to tell us a little bit more about what you experienced while you were playing soccer in Germany of
I was
1997.
just gonna to tell you that story. I was
Yeah.
gonna one instance, a few instances, because again, growing up in Scarborough was very diverse. So we didn't know too much about, this one is dark, black, white,
Hmm.
Indian, all this stuff, especially Guyanese, it's
Hmm.
very West Indians, very diverse. I have all colors and shades in my you know, my complexion to my dad's complexion to my other brother's complexion to some of my family's complexion. We're all over the place, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
So and so we never really looked at color as a thing. It was just
Right.
like, that person treats you good, treat them good.
Hmm.
Treat people like you know to be treated. So that's how we were raised. Um, so having going to Germany now was a real eye opener,
Hmm.
you know, because I never really looked um, at myself as anything. I never really had to identify like what am I, you know, like
Right.
what color, or what am I? I'm a West Indian Canadian guy. That's it, you know. But
Hmm.
I think Germany really made it very clear that who I am, and opened my eyes too. There's one time, many times in games where the fans would be making monkey noises, and I'm like in my head, I'm warming up or I'm on the field, and I'm like, are they doing that to me? And I would stop, and they would stop. And as soon as I started moving again, they would start making the noises again. And I was just like, wow, like, I look at myself, and I never really had to contemplate, like, damn, like they really see me as, the N word, right?
Right. That's so
Where I
ridiculous.
never, I mean, we've played into tournaments in the States and people have called us that, and, we fought and everything, but I'm looking at 60,000 people like, good luck. I mean,
Right.
but it was very difficult. And after the games, myself and other players of color would unite and say, you know what, just keep your head up, just keep going, and would talk about our experiences. It was like it was the weirdest thing. Like we all just come together in the middle field and we'll all just talk like, yeah, don't worry, just keep your head up. These fans, they don't know, they're ignorant, they don't, just keep your focus, don't let them break you. Everybody's just sharing little experiences. And I thought, wow, out of what could be looked at as such a negative situation, it was such a bonding moment for us to
Hmm.
to, to generate. And it also put me in a perspective like, wow, this is how people really see me in the world, huh? And it was fascinating. It was an eye opener, and it was also a huge learning experience. I remember one instance in particular where I was walking into the tunnel, and I looked over and I saw a guy holding his maybe about 3 years old, 2-year-old kid, and just looked at me with the young kid looked at me with an evil look and put his, gave me the finger and said,
What?
and used the N word. And I was like, wow, this is deep rooted. This is like, it's really deep. And I've never experienced anything like that. And it was a sad moment. I think that was one of the moments where I was like, wow, like, it's different when you're an adult. I mean, you should have um, some more sense or some sensibility, but for a young kid to have that, you could see the passion in the kid's face. You're like, wow, this is really deep rooted. And not everybody was like that. There was a few people that took us under their wing and created a great and enjoyable times for us. But yeah, so those were some experience that were trying times in my career.
I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, that's so ridiculous. Like, I cannot believe that, especially with someone so young. Like, you obviously can have a brief insight into what parents are telling them at home and what belief system they're being raised with. But that, like, I do really like, though, that out of this negative situation, like you mentioned, because I wanted to ask about this, was the camaraderie that you built with other athletes of color within that time. Because who else do you have to support you in those situations? Like, let's
Right.
like, I'm a bit curious, like, knowing that that was such a big problem, that racism was so in the forefront at that time. Would you be allowed to go and complain and be like, this is ridiculous, this needs to stop? Or was it kind of like, oh, it's the fans, they could say whatever they want and it's brushed under the rug?
Yeah, I mean, there was complaints. I've seen players actually walk off the field before. So there was complaints, but at that time, you know, the stance that FIFA took, it wasn't as strong as it is taken over the last 10 years maybe, or even a little bit more. The really saying this is zero tolerance now,
Hmm.
right? And we're seeing it in the U.S. as well, in North America, where and in Canada, where it's very still very relevant with a lot of communities. But we're seeing it coming more to the forefront now. Obviously, social media helps that, but there was complaints. But like you said, it's you know there wasn't really much being done about it
Mhm.
as we see now.
Didn't that like mentally affect you though? Because I can't imagine 60,000 people who are there and it like you're coming from a place that embraces multiculturalism to a place that's like the complete opposite. And even though you have that camaraderie, didn't it still affect you in some way?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. You cannot say that it didn't affect me. I mean, there's times where I'll go home and I'll be crying.
Mhm.
I'll just be like, but I'll be crying 'cause I'm so angry that I can't
Mhm.
believe the world is like this. But it opened my eyes to show you how the world really is. It's not all. It's not all. People aren't all acceptable to everybody. People smile on your face and behind your back, they're. And I've seen teammates do that. I've seen it at so many levels, right? Where someone would say something, I'd be like, dude, you're supposed to stick up for me there, and you didn't. So so it did show me a lot. It did teach me a lot about myself. It taught me about how to grow up and how to deal with certain ignorance,
Mhm.
and you can't solve ignorance with ignorance. Sometimes you got to solve ignorance and just smile, and that's probably the worst thing that they hated when they knew it didn't affect you.
Exactly, but I again, I'm sorry that that was such a negative situation, but it's a learning experience, like you said,
Yeah.
and you really just have to have some thick skin to get through that. So obviously, I'm really happy that you did, but you have experience playing in Canada and also the States. So comparing the two, have you found any stark differences between like the sporting world in Canada and the States when it comes to diversity and inclusion?
um yes, in terms of diversity and inclusion, yeah, I think states is still more far advanced than
Mhm.
we are. I think it's very clear to see within their board and their decision makers. Now you start to see, the US is, I think, far more advanced on so many levels, where we're still very strong English, Scottish control.
Mhm.
uh, and I think it's time to Italian too. Italians have a big stronghold in the community, but there's so much other cultures that kind of makes up that know the game, love the game, and are just as or even more knowledgeable, that we should start gathering wealth of knowledge from everywhere and re-identify you know how we play the game, or who's making the decisions. So I think on that side, yeah, there is still a big gap in between of us allowing more football minds, even players,
Mhm.
into positions of power within our governing bodies.
Hopefully in time, that's all stuff that will happen, but it's just so unpredictable. You never know. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it seems like everyone's taking the step in the right direction, then they can take 5 steps backwards, and you're like, "What's happening?" So, I mean, I totally agree with you. You need different mindsets in positions of power, and also in terms of the teams and players and all that. But one reason that I loved your story so much because it's like a quote against all odds type of story where like you started in one situation and you ended up, pursuing your goals, your passions, and becoming a Canadian legend essentially. So I know that giving back to the community must be a huge part of what you do and what you care about. So can you speak a little bit to how you've been giving back to the community? And I know you also have an organization. So like what are some of the positive outcomes that you've seen from your organization?
The most positive outcome I see is just making kids feel like they're accepted, and making them feel like they're free to express themselves openly and honestly. Again, I do have a foundation that focuses on inner city communities. And I do have an academy that focuses on more like kids that want to take their game to the next level. But I think with both, we utilize sport to create an environment for kids to express themselves and to feel accepted. And through that sport, as I've taken it and has brought me across the world, has been able for me to take care of my family, they too can have that same fortunes. But if soccer is not their passion, they can still utilize sport to release any negativity, any stress, get to know people. So we try to always create a fun learning and disciplined environment for our youth, and that's through my Dero Foundation, and that's through my Dero United Football Academy.
I know this sounds super cliche, but like kids are actually the literal future. So having these outlets for them is so important because, you know, a lot of people, a lot of kids might feel like they don't have the opportunities that everybody else does. So to give them that hand and help them along that way is so meaningful and impactful to so many people. My last question for you, and you can brag as much as you want. Looking back at your career, what would you say your biggest accomplishments for Canada have been?
Representing the national team, you know, was my biggest accomplishment. I mean, single parent, inner city community, government housing, and I made it. You know, I think that's the story that I always want to tell the youth, that there's no excuses. Anything that you put your mind to do, you can do it. It's just have to have a strong mind and a even stronger willpower. Every time I put on that jersey, I just feel proud. I feel a huge sense of passion and responsibility as well. I wait to 2026, so you know, World Cup actually comes here to see my dream come true, because I've always wanted to get Canada to play in a World Cup. To play in a World Cup, that's been my dream. I was very fortunate to play in the U20 World Cup, and that's probably another one of my biggest goals, winning the Gold Cup for Canada in 2000. But to actually be in a World Cup, I could have went on the field for 2 seconds and came off and said, okay, I'm retired. I'm good. I fulfilled my dream. So to see other Canadians have the opportunity to live out my dream is amazing.
See, hopefully 2026 is the year for that. And, you know, a lot of the times with athletes, like, career-wise, like it's years and years and years of hard work, and then sometimes that passion dwindles. You're like, you know, I've had my time, but I feel like with you, your passion is still continuing as strong as it was before, and I think that says
Even
a lot
more.
about, even more, which says like a lot about you as an athlete, you as a representative for Canada as well. So
who told me to do an academy and foundation? Now I'm responsible for so many kids' lives.
I know, but it's awesome. And I'm sure they're super appreciative of it. So thank you so much for your time. I felt like that chat was super insightful, and I'm glad that you opened up about some of the experiences that you had, because you never know, right? Like someone watching this might be going through the same similar experiences that maybe you went through and not knowing how to deal or navigate through it. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. And thank you so much. And knowing it's a small world, say hi to your parents, my fellow Guyanese community. And, it's so beautiful to see how you've grown up, you've become, and making something of yourself as well. So
thank you so much. I appreciate that.